Hello everyone, Aman here for Digit and welcome to our 6-hour battery drain test comparison, this time between the OnePlus 15R and the OnePlus 13R. Now the 15R doesn't have the telephoto lens or the 120Hz LTPO display which the 13R had, but the 15R does instead get a much larger 7400 mAh battery and not to mention a better primary rear camera and an autofocus selfie camera, and the list goes on. The prices of both the 15R and the 13R are on your screens, and as you can see there's a 6,000 rupees price difference between both devices, and in fact the 16GB RAM option of the 13R still costs 1,000 rupees cheaper than the 15R's base model. Also, a quick look at the key specifications of both smartphones. So quite clearly, the OnePlus 13R has a 120Hz LTPO display, but the 15R can go up to 165Hz. The 15R's panel is also brighter, it has better durability, the faster chip and a bigger battery. The 13R on the other hand gets the same charging speeds as well as a 16GB RAM option. As always, we start by booting up both devices, and the 13R powers on just a touch faster than the 15R. Now both phones are connected to the same Wi-Fi network and fully charged. The display resolution and refresh rate are set to auto. Brightness has been calibrated to around 510 nits using a lux meter, and audio levels are fixed at 50%. Alright. Starting with the 2-hour YouTube video playback round. Now on paper, both phones look pretty similar, but in real world use, the OnePlus 15R's screen comes across as the better one. It is slightly larger and noticeably brighter, hitting 1800 nits in high brightness mode versus 1600 nits on the 13R, which makes reading text easier outdoors. The shift from LTPO on the 13R to LTPS on the 15R is technically a downgrade in efficiency, but it brings clear advantages for gamers, including support for up to 165Hz refresh rate and a claimed 3200Hz instant touch response rate. In actual use, touch input feels fast and accurate, especially while gaming. Color tuning is also a bit better on the 15R with a slightly cooler tone in natural mode, while the 13R looks warmer. The 13R's LTPO panel is also marginally more efficient, but the 15R balances that out with a brighter, better tuned display and higher refresh rate support. With that, we are done with the 2-hour YouTube video playback round, and it looks like the LTPO display definitely did its work here. Despite a 15R's bigger battery, both phones are tied at 89% right now. So now it's time to record an hour of video split between the front and rear cameras. Let's start with the rear camera. 4K 30fps video for around half an hour. While the recording is on, here are the camera specs for both devices. The OnePlus 15R features a 50 megapixel dual rear camera setup paired with a 32 megapixel front-facing camera for selfies. There's support for up to 4K 120fps recording from the rear and 4K videos from the front, but strangely only up to 30 FPS. The OnePlus 13R on the other hand comes with a 50 megapixel triple rear camera setup, yes, with a 50 megapixel telephoto lens. This is paired with a 16 megapixel front camera. It supports video recording at up to 4K 60 FPS from the rear and a 1080p 60 FPS from the front. Alright, it is time to wrap up a 30-minute 4K video recording test using the rear cameras. In terms of thermals, the OnePlus 15R peaked at around 35.1 degrees Celsius, while the 13R touched 37.5 degrees Celsius. So the 15R definitely managed heat better. Okay, let's begin the 30-minute 1080p video recording test using the front cameras. And while that is running, here are some photo samples captured on both smartphones. With that, we have completed a full hour of video recording. So checking thermals once again, and both phones peaked at around 33 degrees Celsius. So after 3 hours of testing, the OnePlus 15R has finally taken the lead with 79% battery remaining, while the OnePlus 13R follows closely behind at 77%. Time to run some benchmarks to get an idea when put under heavy load, which phone delivers the better performance and of course better endurance. First up, the specs. The OnePlus 15R is powered by the new Snapdragon 8 Gen 5 chip paired with 12GB LPDDR5X RAM and up to 512GB UFS 4.1 storage. The OnePlus 13R on the other hand is powered by the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 SoC and comes with up to 16GB LPDDR5X RAM and 512GB UFS 4.0 storage. So starting with Geekbench 6 and going purely by the scores, the 15R clearly pulls ahead. It is roughly 29% faster than the 13R's single core performance and delivers a much bigger jump of around 85% in multi-core performance. In Antutu, the gap between both phones is much narrower. The 15R still comes out ahead overall, scoring about 5% higher than the 13R. The biggest difference shows up in CPU performance, where the 15R is roughly 17% faster, which lines up with what we saw in Geekbench. GPU scores, however, tell a slightly different story, with the 13R actually edging ahead by around 2%, suggesting that raw graphics performance is fairly evenly matched between the two. Now in 3D Mark, the OnePlus 15R once again takes a clear lead. Its best loop score is about 7% higher than the 13R, but the bigger difference shows up in sustained performance. The 15R's lowest loop score is roughly 26% higher, and stability improves from 58.6% on the 13R to 69.5% on the 15R. Frame rates also stay higher overall. Put simply, the 15R not only delivers better peak GPU performance but also holds on to it more consistently during longer gaming sessions. Finally, in the CPU throttling test, the results are a bit more nuanced. The OnePlus 13R actually posts a higher average score at 282,000 GIPS compared to 221,000 GIPS on the 15R. However, sustained performance tells a different story. The 15R manages 88% stability, which is a noticeable jump over the 74% stability seen on the 13R. This means that while the 13R can hit higher peak CPU numbers, it drops performance more aggressively under prolonged load. The 15R, on the other hand, maintains its performance far more consistently, which is what matters more during long gaming sessions or, say, extended heavy use. Now here's a quick look at the scores from the benchmarks round. You can pause and take a look. A quick check at the battery stats after 4 hours, and the OnePlus 15R is still in the lead with 58% battery, and the OnePlus 13R is left with 53% battery. Now when it comes to gaming, benchmarks do show the OnePlus 15R pulling ahead, especially in terms of sustained performance, but as always, numbers are only part of the story. In real world use, both the 15R and 13R deliver a very solid gaming experience. Popular games like BGMI, Call of Duty Mobile and Asphalt run smoothly on both phones with stable frame rates and no obvious stutters during regular play sessions. Where the 15R starts to feel more future-ready is in the extras it offers. Support for up to 165 FPS in compatible games gives it a slight edge, particularly for competitive players who care about these finer details. Thermals are fairly well controlled on both devices. Yes, they do get warm during extended gaming, but neither phone becomes uncomfortably hot in real-world use, unlike what stress tests might suggest. Overall, gaming is good on both, but the OnePlus 15R feels a bit more polished and better suited for longer, more demanding sessions. And with that, we have wrapped up the gaming round as well. At this stage, the OnePlus 15R continues to hold its lead with 49% battery remaining, while the OnePlus 13R is down to 41%. We are now entering the final stretch of our battery drain test. Up next, I'll be running an hour of Instagram on both smartphones, but instead of keeping you waiting till the very end, let's fast forward straight to the 6-hour mark. By this point, the OnePlus 15R finishes with 44% battery left, while the OnePlus 13R wraps up with a 33% battery. Here's a look at the hour-by-hour battery drain comparison for both phones on your screens right now. So after 6 hours of continuous testing, battery-wise, the difference is once again closer than the raw capacity numbers suggest. The OnePlus 15R with its 7400 mAh battery drained 56% or around 4144 mAh, while the 13R with a smaller 6000 mAh cell drained 52% battery, which might sound large, but this is roughly 4020 mAh. So in practical terms, basically you should only know that both phones will easily get you through a full day and then some more on a single charge with identical fast charging speeds. The 15R does have the advantage of a much larger battery though, but the 13R's LTPO display helps it stay highly efficient, allowing it to keep pace despite the smaller cell. Where the OnePlus 15R pulls ahead is the performance, with better sustained output, support for up to 165 FPS gaming and slightly improved thermals, making it the better pick overall for power users and gamers. So that's it for this battery drain test comparison between the OnePlus 15R and the OnePlus 13R. Share your thoughts with me in the comments below, and as always, I will catch you all in the next one. Thank you for watching.